Seems like everyone who was going to join us has, so we'll go ahead and begin. Hello, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Leslie McWhorter, and I'm one of the Strater product managers. I'm here today to go over the top 6 frequently asked questions in Strater 3. The questions I will be reviewing are, can I plot elevation as well as depth, and if so, where do I do it? How can I load a custom fill pattern? How can I create a header and populate it with linked text objects? How can I hang my cross-section on elevation? Can I overlay a log on a cross-section? And how do I save and use a template? After the discussion of each question, I will stop for a few minutes and pass the reins to the other Strater product manager, Carrie Dickinson, to answer any questions you might have. You can send your questions to us via the chat function. At the very top of your screen, you should see a green tab that says Viewing Leslie McWhorter's Application. Click on that tab and then click the chat button. Please send these chats just to Golden Software and not to everyone. This webinar will also be recorded, so after the webinar has finished, the video will be available on our website at www.goldensoftware.com. So let's begin. I will first go over the differences between setting the borehole orientation to depth or elevation versus setting the depth log orientation to depth or elevation, and then I will go over how to display elevation and depth in the same view. There are 2 places you can set the orientation. The first is under View, View Properties. The view properties contain the generic properties for the entire view. You can see in the View tab of the Property Manager, there's a borehole orientation. The borehole orientation is whether the depth values increase or decrease with depth. This orientation comes from your data tables. Since the starting borehole depth in our collars table is less than the ending borehole depth, our log is descending, so the borehole orientation should be set to depth. This will affect our entire borehole view. If we set this to elevation instead, we are telling Strater that the depth value should decrease with depth, so all of our logs will be flipped upside down. Again, I'm going to keep this set to depth since the data in our data tables is depth data and not elevation data. The other place to set the orientation is in the Property Manager for the depth log. If you click on the depth log, we can see here in the depth log tab of the Property Manager, there is an orientation. Orientation dictates whether the log displays elevation values from the appropriate column in the collars table, or depth values. If we change this to elevation, the log will now go from 500 at the top, using this elevation from the collars table, down to 300 at the bottom. Let's switch this back to depth, and then add an additional well showing elevation so we can compare them side by side. To add a depth log showing elevation values for DH1, I will click this button in the toolbar. Then I will click next to the depth log under the elevation header. In the Property Manager, I will set the orientation to elevation because I want to display the elevation values. Again, Strater pulls this information from the collars table, so we need to have a collars table for this borehole that has elevation data. As you can see, these aren't aligned next to each other, and I'd like them to be. So I'm going to hold the Shift key and click on the depth log to highlight the depth log and the elevation log. Now I can go to Arrange, Space Objects, right to left in order to get the elevation log lined up with the depth log. I will now pass this topic off to Carrie for any questions about elevation versus depth or orientation versus borehole orientation.
Thanks, Leslie. So are there any other questions about depth versus elevation? All right, the first question we have is so that the log shows elevation is only for one borehole, and that's correct. This elevation log only shows data for DH1, the current borehole in the borehole view. You can change the borehole by clicking on the Base tab, and in the ID filter, you can change it to whatever hole ID you have in your data file or in your data tables. Now this ID filter is only available if you have an elevation log or if you have a depth log and the depth scope is set to either hole measured depth or hole true vertical depth. If you have a depth-oriented depth log set to overall depth, then the ID filter is going to be grayed out. And that's because all holes in the view are going to be used to calculate the depth log values, so that's why it's grayed out. I'll reset the depth log orientation back to elevation. Are there any other questions about depth versus elevation? Nope. Okay, Leslie, back to you.
Thanks, Carrie.
Thanks, Carrie.
The next topic we'll be going over is how to set a custom fill pattern. Now, I've already taken a screen capture of a pattern from the internet and saved it as a PNG image file in order to save a little time. To set this custom fill pattern, I'm going to click on the lithology log, and then next to lithology scheme in the property manager, I will click on lithology keyword. You'll note an ellipsis button appears, and I'm going to click on that ellipsis button to open the scheme editor. Click on the plus sign next to lithology keyword in order to expand the keyword scheme. I don't particularly like the pattern that was chosen for granite, so we'll click on granite, and then I will click on igneous rock 1 next to the pattern, which is the current pattern, and then that will expand this drop-down menu. At the bottom of the drop-down menu, I will click the Load File button. Choose your fill pattern of choice and click Open. Now, click OK to close the scheme editor and apply the changes you've made. You can see that now each instance of granite has that fill pattern that I just chose. I will pass this off again to Carrie for any questions about using a custom fill pattern.
Okay, so our first question is, can I create my fill patterns directly in Strater? The fill patterns you use must be images that you either load or copy to the clipboard. You can create them in Strater by simply drawing them using the tools under the Draw menu. And then you can either copy them, and then let me draw a rectangle very quickly. And after you copy the pattern, you could choose the you would have the clipboard option available, and you could paste the pattern directly into the palette here, or you can export them just like Leslie showed, export them to an image file, and then click Load File and load them that way. All right, so the second question is, what type of image file formats can I save my pattern as, and how big should the images be? So you can save your images in almost any image file format, such as GIF, JPEG, bitmaps, PNG files, or TIFFs. Probably JPEGs, GIFs, and PNGs are best because they're smaller image file formats. The larger the images you use, the larger the SDG file will be, and the longer it will take to redraw the logs in the view windows. As for the image size, I'd probably try a 250 pixel size for the image. For example, let's go back to this palette. All these predefined photo patterns, you can see the pixel values right here for the image. This is the 256 by 256 pixel image. So most of these images are 256 or less pixels. The gray ones down here are about 500 pixels by 500 pixels. So I would first start with an image that's about 250 pixels large and then see how that looks. And you can adjust as needed. Like I said, keeping the images smaller will keep the SDG file size smaller, and it will be faster to load and use in the logs. Any other questions? Oh, okay, back to you, Leslie.
Thanks, Carrie. The next topic that I'll be going over is how to create a header with a linked text object. So first we'll want to come up with the structure for our header. So I'm going to go to View, Fit Pane to Window to zoom in on the header pane. And then I'm going to go to Draw Polyline. I'm going to click on the left-hand side of the header pane and hold Control in order to make a completely straight line. I will then double-click to the right to end that line and hit Escape to end digitizing mode. You might notice that this doesn't quite go to the end, and so I'm going to select that line and up in the toolbar set the width to 8 because the width of our header is 8 inches. Now, because this is the appropriate length and straightness that I want, I'm going to right-click and copy this polyline. I will right-click again and paste it 3 times, once right below the title, and then 2 more times to split the remaining area into thirds. Once we have this done, I'm going to go once more to Draw Polyline. I'm going to line my cursor here up at the top with 4 1/4 since that's halfway on our scale. And then I'm going to hold Control to make a perfectly straight line, and then double-click to end this polyline and hit Escape. Now that I've got the general layout down, I can actually draw my linked text by going to Draw Linked Text. I'm going to click once in each of the 6 boxes that I've created and then hit Escape to exit. Now I would like to arrange these objects so that they're lined up properly before I go ahead and insert the proper text into them. So I'm going to click on the first linked text object, hold Shift, and then click on the 2 beneath it to highlight all 3 of them. I will go to Arrange, Align Objects, Left, in order to line them all up with the leftmost object. I will repeat this for the second column, Arrange, Align Objects, Left, and then I will also repeat this using the rows. So click on the first linked text object, hold Shift, and click on the linked text object in the same row. This time I'll go to Arrange, Align Objects, Middle, and I will repeat this, Arrange, Align Objects. This time I'll use Top, Align Objects, Top. Now that our alignment is appropriate, I can actually change the text to be something meaningful. So I'll click on the first linked text object and go to the linked text tab in the Property Manager. I will change the linked text type to column, the linked text table to project settings, and the data column to project name. Now I want to have a title here displaying what it is I'm seeing, so I'm going to type project name into the prefix box and hit enter. And in that way, I have the title of what I'm viewing and then the category from the project settings table. I'm going to repeat this for 3 more of my objects using company name, location, and drilling date from the project settings table. Now you will note if we go to the project settings table that there is only one category for each of these topics. If, however, I were to change the next one to the collars table and use easting and then northing for the last object, you will notice from the collars table that there is an easting and a northing for both DH1 and DH2. So if I were to go to View Properties and change the ID filter to DH2, the easting and northing will change accordingly. We're going to set this to DH1 since that is the actual hole that we're looking at. And then I will go ahead and pass this off to Carrie for any questions you might have.
Okay, so we just got a question, and the first question is, can you use this for putting scale bars as part of the legend? You can certainly put scale bars up here. If you just click on Draw Scale Bar, and then click in the header. If you select the scale bar, you can choose the type to be user-defined, where you describe everything about the scale bar, the starting, the ending, the increment value, or you can choose to have it be associated with a log item, in which case it's going to be just like this gold scale bar over here, where it's going to be tied to the log. So if you move the log, the scale bar also moves. The scale bar isn't part of the actual legend. There is a specific legend option in Strater up here. And the legend just shows scheme values, so symbols and fill patterns and line patterns associated with specific schemes. So that's not going to be quite the same as your scale bar. The next question I have is, if you choose column description for your linked text type, nothing happens. You don't see anything. And why does that happen? So if I selected this linked text item here, what they're talking about is this linked text type, column description, and even column units. If you change it to column description, the linked text type is basically blank, and here all you see is the prefix value. And you can have this happen if you don't actually have a column description or column units in the data table that this linked text is associated with. To enter or edit this data, click on the data table, click on Table, Edit Column Properties, and here you will see the column description and column units. You can just navigate to the column you want and then enter whatever description and units you want. And click OK. And then when you go back to that borehole view, then the column description will be there as part of the linked text or the column units. The next question is, if I have multiple boreholes and choose borehole name or column as a link text type, it seems to only show one of the boreholes. Is there a way to get it to link to the next borehole? No, there's not. At this time, the borehole name and column, these two link text types, are really best used with only one borehole shown in the borehole view. It's not designed yet to show multiple boreholes in a project. When you do use these link text types with multiple boreholes, they'll use the information for the last hole selected as the ID filter for the view. And the next question, can I format the prefix differently from the actual text? And yes, you can do this actually with math text. So for example, let's say we want to make project name bold and in italics. So what you would do is in the prefix include the math text instructions. So right before the prefix, I would choose a \B space for bold, and then a \I space for italics. Be sure to include a space after each set of instructions. Then at the end, when you're done, choose \plain space to return the rest of the text after this, which is the actual link text part, back to the normal font, which is specified on the font tab. So again, be sure to include an extra space at the end, and then press enter, and you'll see the formatting changes here. Now there are many different types of math text instructions you can use, not just plain and italics. And you can find the other syntax in the help. If you click Help Contents, go to the Index tab, and then look under Math Text Instruction Syntax. And that will give you a list of all the things, all the formatting things you can do with the text. Are there any other questions? All right, back to you, Leslie.
Thanks, Carrie. So the next question that I'll be going over is how to hang a cross-section on elevation. Now what this means is showing each hole in their actual relative positions according to the elevation values in the collars table. So we've gone ahead and created our cross-section, and now we're going to go to View, View Properties, and in the View tab of the Property Manager, it will set the reference datum to mean sea level. I would click Yes to recreate the cross-section polygons, and then I will make sure that both of my logs, my depth logs, are set to depth. Or I'm sorry, are set to elevation, because we want to make sure that when we're hanging our cross-section on elevation, we're displaying elevation, because depth is relative and won't mean much in this case. Now this information comes from the collars table, so we can see that for DH1, the top of the log is at 500, and for DH2, the top of the log is at 800, which we can verify as appropriate from the collars table. Alternatively, if we go back to View Properties, we can set our reference datum to marker bed. Yes, we want to regenerate. When we do this, we will want to make sure that our depth logs are set to depth, because when we set the reference datum to a marker bed, the very top instance of that bed in each well will be set to a depth of 0. So elevation won't mean much because this is a relative system. In this instance, andesite as our marker bed is this green, and we can see that it's at a depth of 0 for both DH1 and DH2. I will now pass this off to Carrie for any questions on hanging your cross-section on elevation.
Okay, so we have our first question is, can you hang logs in a borehole view based on sea level or a marker bed? Not at this time. Currently, there's not a way to hang the borehole view on different reference datums, but we really do hope to add this feature in the future, and I will add your vote to this request on the suggestion file. Any other questions about hanging cross-sections on either a marker bed or the mean sea level? No? Okay, Leslie, back to you.
Thanks, Carrie. Now I'll go ahead and talk about how to overlay a log on a cross-section. In this instance, let's say that we have our water table information in a depth column, or in a depth table, and we want to plot this on top of our cross-section. The depth table only needs to contain the hole ID and the depth at which our water table lies. So if we go back to the cross-section tab, I'm going to click on this button in the toolbar to create a post log. I can click anywhere inside of the cross-section view and then make sure that under Use Current Table, it's selected to Water Table, and then click Open. In the Post Log tab of the Property Manager, change Use Keyword Scheme to False so that I can manually set what symbol is being displayed as the water table. Then I will go to the Symbol tab, change the symbol itself to number 21, change the fill color to blue and the line color to blue, and change the size to 0.2 inches. Now that the formatting is appropriate, I'm going to right-click and copy this log, and then right-click again and paste it, clicking anywhere inside of the cross-section view. For this new log, I will go to the Base tab in the Property Manager and set the ID filter to DH2. And now, because these aren't overlain, I'm going to go to Log, Overlay Logs. This will overlay my logs for DH2 with the DH2 borehole and my logs for DH1 with the DH1 borehole. And these are appropriately located now. I'll go ahead and pass this off now to Carrie for any questions about overlaying a log on a cross-section.
Thanks, Leslie. So do we have any questions about overlaying logs? Okay, I have a question, and it is, can I use a custom symbol, or can I change the symbol shape? You can change the symbol shape. You can change the symbol shape, of course, just as Leslie did, by selecting the log and then choosing whatever symbol you have available here. All the available symbol sets are going to be all the fonts that are installed on your computer at the time that you have the log created. If the symbol set lists in Strater, if you can't find the symbol you want in the symbol sets listed, you can search the internet for more fonts to install on your computer, or you may be able to create your own font. The fonts must be a TrueType font file, which has a TTF extension. You can also use software like CorelDRAW or Softy to create TTF files. And then once you download or create a TTF file, put it into your C Windows Fonts folder and reboot the computer. Then the font will show up in the symbol set list, and then you can select that symbol set and then the symbol you want within that symbol set. So the next question is, can I overlay multiple logs on each borehole? Yep, you can create as many logs as you wish. You can either overlay them on top of the logs, just like Leslie just showed, or you can put them adjacent to the logs. Leslie demonstrated how to use log overlay logs, but you can also use log adjoin logs, which puts the logs just next to the well logs. You can see that this log actually is quite wide. It doesn't have to be this wide. So you could probably make it a lot skinnier. And then that way the adjoin logs command would make it look like the logs were right next to each other. These logs are actually going to be separated. Let me move this up a little bit. These two logs that she created here, they're not actually part of the cross-section object, but they are on top of the cross-section in the same log pane, or the cross-section pane here. Any other questions about creating new logs in the cross-section view? Okay, back to you, Leslie.
Thanks, Carrie. The last topic that we're going to go over is how to save and use a template. Now, usually templates are very useful because you spend a lot of time customizing your header and your logs, and this allows you, by saving a template, to quickly and easily reproduce those settings for any new data set you have. The first step is to create a project file in the format you want to use for your future projects. We've already done this, but I don't want to include the cross-section and the map views, so I'm going to right-click and delete those from the project before I save as a template file. So next, I'm going to go up to File, Save As, and choose the Save As type, Strater template file, which is a .tsf file. So I'll give it the name template and then click Save. Now we've got our template saved, so I'm going to open a new Strater file by clicking File, New Project. Now I'm going to right-click in the View Manager and go to Load Template. I'm going to select my template.tsf file and then click Open. You'll notice that borehole 1 is empty, and that was the borehole that was automatically created when we opened our new project. So I'm going to right-click and delete this because we already have our borehole 1 loaded in. So I'll click Yes. And then you'll notice that each of these data tables are empty right now. So we're going to want to load in our data. We'll do this one table at a time by going to File, Load Data, or clicking on this Load Data button in the toolbar. So I'm going to click on Dataset 2 and then check the box next to Import Data into Current Table and click Open. I'm going to select my project settings sheet in my data table and click OK. And then make sure to check the box that says Specify Column Header Row and make sure that's set to column 1 since I have headers in my data table. Now I'll click Next. Now this is where you're going to map the columns in your data file to the columns that already exist in the data file created by the template. In this case, I've already named the columns in my data table to have the same name as the columns from my template so that they are automatically mapped correctly and I don't have to change anything. I can just click Load. Now this is going to be the case for each of my data tables. I'm going to load them in. So I'll start with the water table next. Make sure I'm specifying the column row. These are loaded correctly. And then I'll go through each of my data tables this way. So depth table. Specify header row, load. And then lastly, well construction. Okay, so now that all of our data is loaded, we're going to go back to our borehole view and then go to View, View Properties. We're going to set the ID filter to South Barrow 16. you'll notice that the logs still look funny. And this is because if we go to Log and look at Design Mode, we can see that the button is highlighted. This means that we're in a design mode so that there's no data associated with our logs. When I click this to turn design mode off, we are in active mode now, so the data is associated with our logs. I'm going to move that title that we have, and then I can save this as a new SDG file by going to File, Save As. And I can call this New and click Save. Now I will pass you off to Carrie for any questions about creating and using template files.
Okay, are there any questions about using templates? The first question is, does the data have to be in the same format as the original data for the template to work? And the answer is, the data you want to load and the original data table in Strater don't have to be in the exact same format, but the data does need to be there. For example, the columns could be in a different order in the spreadsheet, and they could be called different things. But all the information requested by the table does need to be in the data file that you are loading. The next question is, do I have to load the template before I load the data? And the answer is, you can load the data first if you want to, but it's generally much easier to load the template first and then the data. And this is because of two reasons. The first is if you create tables with different names than the ones in the template, and then you load the template will create more data tables with the data table names that it's looking for. So then you'll end up with two sets of data tables, the one you created first and then the one the template created. And then you may need to delete all the ones the template created, and it's just a lot of extra steps. You can avoid this, though, if you can be sure that the data tables and columns you create first have the exact same names as they did originally when the template was saved. Then the template won't create all those extra data tables. The second reason that it's easier to load the template first is that each log and linked text item in the view is linked to a particular data table and a particular data column in that data table. So if you load new data in tables and columns with different names, that link is broken. So not only will you need to delete any extra tables the template creates, you'll then need to select each log and linked text item in the views and link it to the new data table and the new data columns. And this can all get pretty tedious. But again, this can be avoided if you can be sure that the data tables and columns that you create have the exact same name that they did originally when the template was saved. And then loading the data first before the template should work just fine. Any other questions? All right, someone else asks, if I load a template and make changes to it, will my template file be updated also? And the answer is no. Once you load a template into a Strater project, the contents are loaded into the project and it ceases to be linked back to the original TSF template file. However, if you do load a template, make changes and update it, all you have to do really is go to File, Save, or File, Save As, and save the updated view out to a new template file. Or if you want to, you can even overwrite the original template file. So that is my last question. Any more questions on templates? All right, so now I'll open this up to any other questions on any topic we just covered. Are there any additional questions that we haven't, or that you haven't had a chance to ask yet? No more questions? All right. If you do happen to have any additional questions once the webinar is concluded, you can email them to Leslie at leslie@goldensoftware.com, or you can email stratersupport@goldensoftware.com. And thank you for your time.